Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and today we're talking about 10 simple rules for enjoying comics. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin' Robbie Billups, this is Pop Culture Philosophers, and today I'm going over 10 simple rules for enjoying comics. It may seem like this video shouldn't be necessary, and in a perfect world it wouldn't be, but we do live in a world where sometimes the things we enjoy start to lose their luster. You know what I'm saying? I look out in the community, here on YouTube, out in comic shops, at the shop I run, my friends, my homies, and I see this pattern repeatedly, where people get into comics, they go hardcore, it's their favorite thing, and then all of a sudden, something kind of starts grinding them down. Maybe they're spending too much money on comics, maybe they're not getting the enjoyment that they did, maybe they're being overwhelmed by the amount of comics that they have now. So, I've been reading comics since 1986, since I was a small kid, and throughout my life, I've had these periods too, right? And these are tips and tricks, things I've picked up along the way, strategies I've learned that I want to share with you, little things that can probably help you kickstart your love of comics again, or start helping you maintain a sense of enjoyment about being a comic book collector, a comic book reader, a comic book community member, if you will, right? Let's get right into it. First thing, read your comics. That's simple, right? But it's easier said than done, because even me, there's so much to amass, so much that we want to experience. And a friend of mine once told me, and I think it's a quote from maybe Oscar Wilde or something, but every time we buy a book, we deceive ourselves into thinking that we're buying the time to read the book, right? That happens with comics too. I got plenty of graphic novels that I've heard about, learned about, got excited for, bought, and haven't found myself to get to yet. In fact, secrets be told, I guess I am a backlog bro. But anyway, that's just the way it goes. But I do encourage you to try to formulate a plan to read at least the majority of your comics. In an ideal world, we'd read 95 to 100% of our comics, but I would say aim for 75% at least, make a strategy, start a reading list, right? Like I do this with books. Like when I start a book, I write it down and what day I started, and then I do it at the end. I don't know, it's the nerd in me. I like to look at my lists and things like that, but you can develop simple strategies. Number two, never pay more than you're willing for a comic. One thing that will drive you out of this industry, out of this community, is spending bucket loads of money and just hopping on a hype train, picking out a book, getting ripped off from a dealer or a reseller or something like that. That's terrible. Be informed when you go in to make a purchase, especially if it's a large purchase, but even if it's not. But just don't pay more than what you're willing to. Right? Like, if you think that book shouldn't be more... A good example. New Mutants 98. I don't own one. I think that my top dollar on that I would pay would be $20. That's why I don't have one. But if one ever came across for around $20, no matter the condition, I would get it because that's how I enjoy it. But regardless, you may price that book higher. That's on you. Don't pay more than you're willing to. Don't spend too much money for your comics. Don't make it hurt yourself or anything like that. Next, talk about your comics. You know, not only read them, and of course don't spend too much, but talk about them. That's one of the reasons why I love doing the weekly comic book review and Rockin' Robbie Live, is I love talking about comics. I love doing the monthly stream because I love having people together to talk about comics. I love working at the shop because I love to sit around and talk about comics. So that's one of the things that keeps my interest going in. You know how like when you watch a TV show and a bunch of your friends are into the same show and a new episode drops and you have that quote-unquote water cooler talk and discussion? That's what I love about comics and the comic shop and this comic book community. So definitely talk about your comics. Next up, prune your collection. It can be very overwhelming to amass so many books. Some of them we may not be reading, but we are working on that, right? But you could amass so many books and it becomes overwhelming. It becomes a space issue. You don't even know where to start with the collection. You may have a wall of comics or a room full of graphic novels and you don't even know where to start. But you got to prune your collection. That's one thing to do, is very often visit your collection and choose things that to separate out, to get rid of in some form or fashion. We'll touch that on. Buy what you want. Buy what you want. This kind of touches in on not paying too much, but at the same time, just buy what you want. If you want to spend $500 for a Mobius out of print collection, more power to you. That's super cool. Like, whatever you want to buy, whatever you want to collect, do it. But never pay more than what you're willing to. But don't try to be influenced too much by people saying that this book is hype, this book is spec hype, this book is going to make you money, this book is great, it's the pick of the week, you better pick it out, you better read it. Like, don't even listen to me. Like, make up your own mind, choose what you want to buy, and focus your buying habits on that, 100%. Organize your collection. Maybe I should have said this as the next one before I went to prune your collection, but organize it. You do want to do that before it gets overwhelming. Mine got out of control for years, and just recently I took a weekend off and I made sure that I was going to do it. So I put all of my comics in order, and since I've done that, I have separated stuff out to prune, to get rid of, to sell, or to give away, things like that. So that's all done, and now my collection is there. And when my collection is in order, things are more accessible. Somebody's talking about a book, or I want to show an example, or I want to reread something, I can easily go and find it now. That's one of the best things about having a comic book collection, is when it's organized and you can have that luxury. So make that a priority. Like, maybe even like hunker down and like, I took a weekend off. It took me a week to do it. And then revisit your collection. That's another rule. Revisit your collection. Go to it and flip through it again, right? That all works together with organizing your collection, revisiting your collection, and then pruning your collection. See, it's a process. So when your collection's organized, you're more likely to enjoy going into those boxes, flipping through the stuff, taking a look at it, pulling things back out, rereading it. And then in this process, you can kind of redetermine what you want to keep for 5 more years, or what you're cool with getting rid of now. And then you can separate that out and you can prune your collection. So those 3 things kind of work together. And then I would suggest trying something new. That's another rule. Always try something new. Even if you flip through a book and the artwork at first turns you off, but you've heard maybe some buzz about it, or maybe there's a possibility that you might be into it, read the first few pages there at the shop. Read the first few pages online or something like that. Make a commitment to purchase just the first issue. Give it a shot. Read it. See what you think. There are many times in my life where initially I looked at an artist and I was like, oh my goodness. But then I actually would read the work and get into the work, and now understand a new perspective and respect for the artist. People like, even in my life, for instance, Jack Kirby. I did not like Jack Kirby when I was a kid, but the more I grew into the history of comics and appreciation of the pop art aspect and the dynamic energy in superhero comics, the more and more I appreciated Kirby. He's now like my favorite artist. I am constantly rediscovering new artists. I am just now getting into Mobius for the first time truly in my life, and I'm loving it. And some of his stuff is out of print, but I don't pay more than what I'm willing to. So I'm buying what I want, I'm paying what I'm willing, and I'm discovering something new. So it's really cool to always widen your perspective a little bit and just try something new occasionally every once in a while. Next up, give away your comics. Yes, you want to set some of those aside, prune that collection. You want to sell some of those and use that money to fund into the collection. But some of them, you just want to give away. You just want to give them to people in the community. Maybe it's AOKs. Give them to your homies. Give them to people that may not read comics, right? Cartoonist Kayfabe recently did this thing called Kayfabe Christmas in July, where they encouraged everybody to go and put comics in those neighborhood free public lending libraries. And that was a really cool initiative. Another thing that I have heard and have done before is when you're in a doctor's office, dentist's office, any kind of place that has a waiting room, bring a comic or two and leave them there with the magazines. Leave comics, give comics away, put them into people's hands that don't necessarily read. And by giving out comics and people getting maybe like somebody back into comics or into comics for the first time, that is something that will increase your enjoyment because you're a part of this giving and receiving of the community. And then the final rule is don't read just comics. Read other things. Read magazines, read your news articles, whatever you want to read. Read nonfiction books, read fiction books, read novels, read novellas, read short stories. Don't just read comics. Comics are amazing, but there's so much more to do. And sometimes you just get burnt out on reading comics and you want to just soak in for a few hours on one novel and let your imagination go, right? So don't neglect that part of your brain, of your enjoyment of creative enterprises and art. Don't let other parts suffer because you're reading so many comics, because you don't want to get burnt out on comics, and at the same time you still want to be able to have a rich imagination when you're reading, say, like a prose novel. And you also want to read nonfiction stuff, historical stuff, whatever suits you, whatever you're into. I'm just a big reader, so I like to read. So those are the rules. Let's sum it up again. Never pay more than you're willing to. Read the majority of your comics. Talk about comics with people. Prune your collection. Only buy what you personally want. Organize your collection. Keep it neat. Revisit your collection. Try something new every once in a while. Give away some comics. Don't just sell everything off. Sometimes just give some things away. Try to get people into the community. And don't read just comics. Anyway, these are things that I do that keep an enthusiasm and a vibrancy about this industry, this community, in my life. And that's why every week I'm excited for New Comic Book Day. Every week I'm excited to dive into back issue bins. I'm excited to dive into my collection, to reread things, to experience things for the first time. I'm loving it. Anyway, what about you? What tips, what tricks, what strategies do you utilize to keep enjoying comics? Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And join us over at patreon.com/PCP if you want to help support the channel. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. Thanks for rocking with us. Station. Pop, pop, boom.